So this is straight from Wikipedia. We're taking the literal definition when we talk about this this process. So we're talking about total material requirements for a project. And what we're going to do is apply this concept to CAD processes using a couple of the tools that EC has created, SOCKETWorx and DBWorks, like Joe said. So that's kind of the stance that we're taking here. And at a high level, here's what we're going to cover. So just a couple material management objectives. What are we actually trying to accomplish? We'll talk about the hardware requirements in kind of a network diagram so you can see what hardware is required. We'll talk about the software requirements or the applications and what outputs come from them. We'll do a couple workflow processes so you can see at a high level certain aspects of this process and how you would go about doing certain things. And then we'll do a demonstration. We'll just show you exactly how it works. So we'll start it off with talking about the objectives. And there's a couple things that we were trying to accomplish. Number one is centralize all of the data in the project. So your line list data and your component data. Make it so that it's all centralized in one place. We want to be able to maintain a parts catalog as well. So every part that you would possibly purchase for any project, have that centrally located in one place, and then easily and efficiently integrate that to your CAD data as well. We want to be able to create material requisitions, so doing some purchasing, either doing a bulk purchase off your parts catalog or purchasing directly off of the model. We want to be able to do both, basically. And then do some discrepancy reporting. So either check versus the line list in the 3D model, checking what line numbers match, what doesn't match, and then the requisitions, seeing what you've purchased versus what's in the model and what matches and what doesn't match. And then finally, the ability to issue or consume material when it's time to fabricate. So either do that by the project, by the unit, by the area, or by a spool, or so on, however you want to issue material. And then lastly, it's all this component information that we're putting in a database and we're organizing it and structuring it. We want to be able to see that on the fabrication drawing itself. Whatever kind of metadata you want to carry with the component, we want that ability to be able to see it on the fabrication drawing. And then if required, if you really want to take this info and send it somewhere else, we want the ability to load a material resource planning system, if you have one, just if required. So that's it for the objectives. And then as far as hardware requirements, only a couple steps here. So on the left-hand side, it's kind of steady as she goes. Just however you guys are implemented today is how you would implement the SOCKETWorx tool. The only difference is you may have a server there right next to your data server where you host the SOCKETWorx instance. And that acts as a go-between between your designer's computers, in your local area network, and that data server where you store all your project data. There's a break there. There's that first little block. This is just a firewall, right? Going outside of your ecosystem, your system. If you choose to host SOCKETWorx as a web service, you could provide access to remote workstations. So either your customers or your vendors or people out in the field, whoever you wanted to share the drawing information, the data from the PDFs, anything relative to that project, you can now provide access to them in a controlled and structured way, give them edit access or view access. And then finally, the last firewall here is where this goes to our Azure server, where we just do license administration, basically for SOCKETWorx. So there's no information that's shared besides just administration things on the SOCKETWorx side to ECE. Everything that's proprietary to your environment still resides only on your data server. That's it for hardware. On the software side, we're just reading from one singular SQL database where we're storing all this data. So this top leg here, I'm just talking about two applications. That it could be extended to anything really that's storing data within a database, but this could be CADWorx data or could be Plant 3D data. Those deliverables from those programs through designing and drafting could be flow diagrams, process diagrams, electrical diagrams, or just the 3D model data itself, or the isometrics that come from those 3D models. So all of that's getting stored inside the SQL Server, and then the lower leg is where we're starting to read that data in an easy to digest way, and then to do things with that data. So to do that, we're using two applications. The first is SOCKETWorx, this little S with the plug, that's the SOCKETWorx logo. That's the web interface where really anyone in the organization can kind of look at that project data. And then DBWorks is a standalone user interface for also looking at SQL data. This would be more like something the designer or the project manager would use. And now we have access to do a lot of things with that SQL data, like compare line lists, look at the 3D model data, or make edits to the 3D model without being inside of the actual CAD application. We can create and manage and update and edit the parts catalog. We can look at the requisitions and create requisitions off the model. We can issue material from our ISO drawings and then start to compile that ISO material and decrement it from our in-house inventory. And then we could do markups as well. So SOCKETWorx allows us to do PDF markups in the web browser and then share those with other users. And then there's lots of little reporting capability that's built into this. So at any point in the process, you can export out into Excel. Everyone likes to use Excel, right? So we make the reporting very easy, however you want to report off this data. So that's it for the software side. And then let's talk about a couple processes next. So this is more of a high-level graph of how we're taking the data from your CAD environment and bringing it into a database through SOCKETWorx so that we can start to do things with that data. So on the left-hand side, where we feel like this originates is just having a parts catalog, which means being dedicated to having a part number. You have to have a part number for this system to work. So if you don't have a part number that you're using currently, through the DBWorks application, we make it easy to generate a parts catalog midstream. So you don't have to start with a parts catalog. What we're saying is that you will need a parts catalog that's either generated from your existing files or one that you're updating as you go. So we go from the parts catalog and your specs into CADWorx. We start to do our designing, our drafting. We're building 3D models. We're putting information in a SQL database, and then we're building our deliverables. So the piping isometrics, we can feed through our Isometric application. We can pull in the piping isometric bill of material into the database, which we can then read with SOCKETWorx. And then when it comes to either the 3D model itself or our plans and sections, we can take our DBWorks application and then also supply that into SOCKETWorx itself. So everything's being read from one repository. We can start to generate our load sheets, and if you want to, we can feed the MRP system that you may have. That's the first process, and then let's just talk about a couple project control tasks, like being able to compare or rectify the line list to do the 3D model. This is something that you would do inside of DBWorks. So you would pull up the discrepancy reporting. If you find some issues, if you don't find any issues first, you'd buy to the designer's lunch, right? That's required, of course. And then if you do find issues, well, the designers have work to do. So what do? Well, you export a report. It goes right out to Excel. And then you can send that to someone and say, hey, here's the list of what matches and what doesn't match from the line list to the 3D model. Please go to work on this. The next project control task would be just doing bulk buys, material buys off the catalog itself. So inside DBWorks, you'd go to your parts catalog, you'd make sure it's updated. If it is updated and you have part numbers assigned to everything, then you just go shopping, right? Update your quantities and make your purchase. And then then the system would update the inventory automatically for you. So let's say that wasn't the case. Let's say you don't have a parts catalog. Well, you can use DBWorks to generate a parts catalog off your actual model itself and assign part numbers to it, to the catalog, as well as to the 3D model. So if you don't have a catalog, what I'm saying is it's not a big deal. You can walk into this midstream, either update the catalog that may exist in the past that hasn't been updated, or you can just update the 3D model, and we'll show you that as well. The next project control task is doing bulk buys versus the 3D model. So now we're just doing a little discrepancy report. You know, you've made some requisitions, you've done some purchases. So inside CADWorx, you would just filter your view based on the material takeoff. What do you want to check against? And then you'd open your requisitions and set your filters. So how do you want to filter the recs? You could show all of them, or you could just show by certain requisitions that were made. Once that's done, you run a report, and then you check. You can then create more requisitions based on the output of that report. So if you are missing stuff after you do your discrepancy reporting, you can go and make a requisition directly off that. And then we do the same thing. We update inventory. Another task here is in SOCKETWorx. So once the ISOs are completed, we suck in the BOM information from that. If they're not done, then of course the designers are slow, right? Just kidding. If they are completed, then you release ISOs for fab. If there's issues, you wouldn't release them right. You would have a holding point there, check that everything's complete. That's where we could use the web interface inside SOCKETWorx to look at the PDFs themselves. So if they're good and you're ready to release, you issue the material. And that's where we would pull from your inventory, from your requisitions that you actually created. We can then pull and decrement from that inventory. And now you're ready for fabrication. So I'm going to jump into the demo step here. So all of these little workflow steps, I'm going to illustrate how those would work with the application. I'm going to back out of the PowerPoint and minimize. So I'm using CADWorx today. This could be Plan 3D or some other CAD application that interfaces with a SQL database. But everything here is just, there's about 50 line numbers that I've created. And they've got a line number and they've got a part number that's been assigned. So this is what it looks like at a high level. If I do a sync, you can see that the database syncs. And I've got another application open here, which is the standalone application called CADWorx, open and connected to the same database where this model resides. So I'll pop that open here. This is CADWorx. So CADWorx, what you're looking at in this grid is basically just a view of what's inside this 3D model. So I've only got this one drawing inside the database. So every row represents just a record inside the database itself. So the first step I want to check is whether or not I've actually finished the work here. What line numbers are complete and what still needs to be completed off my line list. So on the Home tab, I'm going to go and compare the P&IDs and the piping. And I can do this discrepancy reporting two ways. I could check by a line list, so I don't have to have a P&ID database I'm pulling the line numbers from. I happen to here, so that's what I'm going to do, but this could originate from Excel if you wanted. So when I click this, what it does is it looks through and it says, okay, in the P&ID database, you've got no match there, and the piping model, oh, you've got a match there. So this report that I've created, I can then export this to Excel, and it pops right open. Now I can email this to someone. Whoever's in charge of this model, I can say, hey, here's what matches, and here's what doesn't match from the P&IDs versus this piping model. So here's your list to attack. Here's what to get to work on. It's pretty simple enough, so I'll go ahead and close that. The next thing I want to do is look at the catalog data that's in the back end here. So the catalog should include all the parts that I could possibly purchase throughout any project. It doesn't have to be this specific project. It could be any one that I embark on. So when I started this, I didn't have a parts catalog. So what I did was I did a piping material takeoff. I exported that out to Excel. I took this blank parts catalog that was here and I exported it to Excel. And then I just assigned a column here for the part number. And here it's called DB code. So you can see it starts from 100,000. And if I go down to the end here, it goes to 100,308. So I just went in sequential order as I was creating these part numbers in sequence. So this makes it a lot easier to establish a part numbering system if you don't try to rely on a schema to do it. And here, just as long as it's unique, I can use this as, think of it as like a primary key for capturing all the metadata that has to do with this long description for that component. So let's say the 3D model wasn't updated with this parts catalog after I imported everything. Well, I've got a button here to update all my projects, all my drawing files based on the long description and the size. It's going to update the DB code. So if I click this, you can see it thinking there in the background. It says process 309 rows. And if I did a sync here and I double clicked on these components, I already did it, but the code there, that's the DB code that's getting updated. So that code is what we're linking to from the parts catalog. I'm going to jump back here to the parts catalog. And not much to say there. If I notice that, you know, after I did my updates, if I saw that a DB code was missing in the drawing, then I would go and just add the records that were missing, re-import to create a new parts catalog, and then update and add more DB codes. It would be that simple to manage this side of it. So another thing I did is I added just a random cost here on the right-hand side, just as an example of the types of metadata you could attach to that catalog. So we'll see that start to compile as we make our requisitions. So I'm going to hit close. I'm going to go to the requisition catalog next. Now I can start to make my purchases. So the first kind of purchase I'm going to do is just a bulk buy. And if I go to requisitions here on the left, this little tab here, you can see that it's blank. So I haven't done any purchasing right now for the project. I'm going to go to the parts catalog, and I'm just going to buy a bunch of pipe, I think, to start off. Or, yeah, let's just do pipe. Highlight those, hit check. So I'm just buying a bunch of random pipe. Let's say that I hadn't done any of the drafting yet, so I don't really know what I need, but I know I'm going to need some pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and purchase it now. I'll say add selected to cart. And in my shopping cart, I can start to whack on the quantities. So maybe I need 20 feet of that, 40 feet of that, you know, 80 feet of that, 200 feet of that, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. You get the idea. Once I've edited the quantities, then I can create the requisition. So I'm going to call this guy, this is the project I'm doing, this 1001. This is going to be my bulk buy number 1. And I'll say, okay. It goes out of the shopping cart. So in the requisitions, you can see those, that is now inside the database. You can see the quantities that I've put in. So over some time, after I start to get more CAD data inside the database, I can start to do actual buys off the project itself, not just making bulk buys. So I'm going to highlight something out of the material takeoff instead, add that to the cart, and then once it's been added, I'll go to my shopping cart, and I'll create a requisition off of this. This is going to be model buy. Okay. So the quantities this time is directly off the model. I didn't just do a random bulk buy. And you can see that the costs are starting to get calculated as well here on the right as well. So I've got these 2 requisitions in place. Now it's time to compare. So let's say 2 weeks later, I want to see the discrepancy report versus the live MTO from the model and those requisitions that I purchased 2 weeks ago. So discrepancy report, I go to reports, and I'll just discrepancy based off everything. I could do it based off one drawing or one line number, but I'll just choose everything in the project. So here, let me expand this a little bit, and I'll sort by this discrepancy column. The black means I'm over, and here's the amount that I'm over. The green means I'm right on the money, and the red means I've got a deficit. And we tell you what the quantity required is versus that quantity ordered. So now I need to make another requisition. I'm going to start to clear up these discrepancies. I'll go ahead and highlight the next couple, hit the checkbox on those, and add those to the cart. Now I'll go to my shopping cart, and I'll create another requisition. This will be my discrepancy buy. And I'll click OK. Now I've got 3 requisitions that basically are 3 purchases for this project. Now if I go to my discrepancy report and I do the report again, I should see a lot more green, right? So here's my black when I'm over. Here's the green where I'm right on the money because I ordered directly off this report, and there's my red. So that's what I could continue to purchase as I go along. If you've done this type of reporting by hand, you know how much time this really saves. This represents quite a lot of work just to get to this point if you're doing it manually. So huge reason to move to this type of system if you can easily get this kind of reporting down. Again, this will all go out to Excel. So I can kick this out to Excel, send it to someone who's doing the purchasing. They would know exactly what to go after. That's it for the Rex. So I'm going to go ahead and close this side of it. And those catalogs that we pulled from the Rec catalog and the parts catalog, in this implementation, it's a part of that same database where I've got the model data, but these could be separate. These could be part of their own database where you've got multiple projects that feed your Rec catalog and your parts catalog, just FYI. So I'm going to jump into SOCKETWorx next. Now that I've created some requisitions, SOCKETWorx in the background has already started to compile my material database. So all of those purchases are going to be in another database, well, another table, where I can start to decrement from that as I release my ISO material. So before I go there, on the ISO side, I've already ISO'd out a couple ISOs, probably like half of the ISOs in this project using Isometric. And what Isometric allows me to do is I can pull in the BOM information into the database as well, which gives me a hold point where I can then release that material when it's time to go to fabrication. So for those not familiar with Isometric, this is a quick and easy way to update title block information across your drawings. So if I check this one first, this is the raw ISO I've got here. So nothing's been updated in the title block, and here's the raw ISO. You know, there might be some cleanup, and here's the bill of material that we're pulling in with Isometric. You notice that it's a really nice table. This is nice to have this type of material table inside Isometric. Very easy to manipulate. The columns that we've chosen are just the mark, size, description, quantity, part number, and heat number. So heat number is blank, but this could represent however many columns you want. There could be spool number in here. There could be cost, you know, whatever you want to see. So everything's been published. Inside my work in progress folder, I've got 3 things for every line. I've got the actual PDF that was published from Isometric. There's a batch publish here when I post-process. There's the BOM information, and there's the raw drawing file. So that BOM is what we're actually pulling into the database. So just setting the stage, now you know that everything's been set up. I'm going to open up the website of this. This is our SOCKETWorx database, or it's really our SOCKETWorx service. I just did a little refresh here. This is running, I'm running this locally right now. You can see all the different table information sections that we're looking at. This represents just one connection to one project, right? So this record is basically all of the lines. I've got 500 different line numbers in this project. I've got 309 records for different parts that comes from the piping table. So that model I showed you, there's 3,572 different records just for the piping alone. And then here's where the requisitions are. So those 3 that I created represents 47 records in the database. The inventory is the collection of all that material information. So after you've got your inventory that you're starting to build up for that project, it hasn't been released yet, you have to get your ISOs in there first. So I've published 50 ISOs for the project. What we're going to do is we're going to start to release those ISOs based off this information and start to decrement from that inventory. So just so you're aware of the interface and how it works, I'm going to go into this parts catalog first. I'm just clicking on this purple rectangle to bring me to this page. This is a window into the same database information that I showed you with DBWorks. So the parts catalog here, I could do the same thing I would do in DBWorks, confirm that everything has a part number, right? Everything has a DB code that's been assigned to it. And then if there wasn't, we make it very easy for you to go in and edit if your admin has given you access to edit this, change the DB code, change the cost or the long description if required, or add records if you need to. I'm going to go into the table information here and show you. Let's jump into the ISO drawings themselves. So the ISOs that I published for this project, SOCKETWorx has already sucked them in, and I can take a look at all of those published ISOs and confirm that they're correct before I go and release the material for it. So to do that, what I can actually do here is I've got a PDF button that's been highlighted. I've already connected all of the published ISOs to the actual record here for the ISO drawings. So when I click PDF, what it does is it renders that exact ISO for me inside the browser. Now I've got an opportunity to do things like either go ahead and release the material, or I can go and do some markups. So if there's things that I don't like about the ISO itself, I can create a markup, and then I could, basically assign this to someone, tell them to go take care of it and publish again. Or if I'm good with everything, I can go and start to release. So it's nice to see this rendered inside one window, right? You don't have a lot of PDF files just floating around or being emailed back and forth. You can look at everything inside just a browser itself and do a lot of markup capabilities in here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that a couple of these are released so I can show you the next step. I'm going to go to the ISO drawings. This is just going to shortcut me back to that table that I showed you before. And I've got a column here for status. I'm going to change the status from blank, basically, to released. Okay. I'll save the changes and then close this guy. So it's been released. Now I'm going to go to the ISO material. This ISO material represents all those 4 ISOs that I just released. So if I look at here in the drawing file name, you can see the 4 columns. So 77 records of material have been released, and now we can start to decrement from our material inventory based on what we've released into the ISO material itself. So that's it. That's the last step there. We've accomplished up to this point. So now we can go and take this record of released material and send it to the fabricator so we can start building stuff. I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint now. So I think we've covered all the major workflow steps.